There's a lot of talk lately about the Nord Stream pipeline being sabotaged. A lot of people are believing that this pipeline doesn't affect energy prices around the world. They don't think, like, for example, in America, that it'll spike energy prices. And you are incorrect. We are in a global market. Whenever the price of energy goes up around the world, it goes up here. A few years back, we allowed all of the oil refinery companies, all that stuff, to basically put in the world market and sell their, took us away from energy, helped take us away from energy independence, not the least of which is some of the things Biden has done with shutting down pipelines in the U.S. and denying drilling permits. It's like he doesn't understand how it works. So let's look a little bit about the Nord Stream pipeline, see if we can understand how it works in the world and why it clearly would not be Russia that would be sabotaging this. It'd be ridiculous for Russia to do it. Politically, they held all the cards over the EU, mostly Germany and other countries that were receiving the oil through the pipeline, where they could turn off the taps, they could reduce the amount that was sent, all these things which they planned on doing. I had no doubt they were going to shut off the gas pipeline come wintertime, put the crunch on most of the EU. But as it stands right now, they would not benefit from destroying their own pipeline. At this point, they lose total control over it. It has no use. It can't be repaired until, repairs won't start until next summer, for example. It'll be a long time before this pipeline is active again. And this is really bad timing for the EU because we're coming up on winter. It's going to make energy prices soar even more. It's going to make energy prices in the world market soar even more. And we're going to likely buy a lot of energy from China in the form of LNG, which China still is supplied LNG, liquefied natural gas, from Russia. So you'll still be buying Russia's oil and gas, but it'll come through China and it'll be them using coal for their energy needs. They're building a whole ton of new coal plants. And you'll be paying a higher price with China as a middleman. World prices will go up. This will affect energy, and it'll affect production. It'll affect food prices. A whole bunch of things will be affected by it, but not the least of which is, food and things that are already high priced all around the world. So let's look at this. Analysis. Nord Stream pipelines sabotaged, and only one country benefits. Pipelines with an S, both of them. 3 deep water explosions destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines under the Baltic Sea on Monday, while the mainstream media and governments reported leaks in the pipelines following sudden pressure drops to 0. Swedish seismologists knew better. One of the 3 explosions measures 2.3 on a Richter scale of earthquake intensity, but this was no earthquake. It was an explosion, like a gigantic undersea mine. Via Reuters, 𝓟𝓛𝓔𝓐𝓢𔔔, seismologist at the Swedish National Seismic Network at Uppsala University, said seismic data gathered by him and Nordic colleagues showed that the explosion took place in the water and not in the rock under the seabed. So very clearly an explosion, very clearly sabotage, and not something likely to have been done by Russia. As much as we want to paint Russia as enemies in this, there's no way Putin would have wanted his pipeline destroyed. That's money for Russia. From what I understand, Russia's economy is the size of Texas economy, and they have like 5 or 6 times as many people. And what we're really talking about here is that source of money helps him fund the war. And Putin is the richest man in the world. If he can get all the oil out of the ground underneath Russia, he is the richest man on the planet. It wouldn't make sense for him to sabotage his own pipeline, cut off his source, his hand that he had control over the EU. It takes away one of his bargaining chips. It makes the EU no longer able to violate all these other countries saying don't buy Russian oil and gas. So it wouldn't make sense for him to do that and take that that tool he has off the table. Now, meanwhile, we see that there's videos released where Biden has threatened Nord Stream in saying that he would not allow, if Russia attacked Ukraine, he would not allow that pipeline to continue. So there's a lot of, did the U.S. do it? Did Ukraine do it? Did Ukraine do it at the behest of the United States because of what was said? I think you even had, I would believe it was Poland, who was like crediting the U.S. for taking that action against the pipeline. There's a lot involved here in world politics, and we're all going to be squeezed in the middle of it. And if you look at this picture, you see that this was when Germany was laughing at President Trump when he spoke at the UN about their dependence on Russian oil and gas. And they said, ha 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 ha, we're not dependent on them. It's not a problem. Here, this just occurred right before the Nord Stream blasts. Without Russian gas, our economy will be dead. Thousands of protesters march in eastern German states against soaring energy prices the night before Nord Stream blasts. So the people are trying to rebel. They're trying to call an end to sanctions on Russia and the reopening of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Again, something that Putin would be like, oh yeah, I got him by the short and curlies. But here, all of a sudden, he blows up his own pipeline? No. So we see that energy prices are spiking, and electricity, heat, gas for cars, all these things, heating your house, these are all going to become very difficult. They were already on track to be very difficult this winter. Now that the pipeline's down, we're going to see much more terrible effects. And in the meantime, the U.S., we're still focused on EVs, and the Biden regime, I like that, approves plan for all 50 states to install EV charging stations covering 75,000 miles of highway. So the Biden administration is going to spend billions of dollars putting up these EV charging stations all around the country so that they can stimulate EV usage. I just want to remind you from 𝓟𝓛𝓔𝓐𝓢𝓔. Here's a little article about how electric cars from earlier in the year, maybe it surged a lot by now, I don't know, but earlier in the year, and they're real strong behind EVs, and EVs are really great. And here we read the first sentence in the article. Electric vehicles represent less than 1% of vehicles on American roads. 1%. Less than 1%. Within the next decade, EVs may dominate the American car market. How many EVs are on the road today? At the end of 2021, just over 10 million vehicles on the road worldwide. 10 million worldwide. What do we got, like 7 billion people? The problem here is that Biden doesn't understand the economy. His housing market's tanking. He talks about inflation is less money in your paycheck. Not what inflation is. Once again, Joe Biden blames gas station owners for his record gas prices. His record gas prices, the key part of that. And his gas station owners. For those of you that don't know, I know people in the gas station industry that have told me that at most they make 15 cents a gallon. That's at the high end. A lot of gas stations take losses on their gas, especially due to credit card fees for processing fees for a credit card transaction. And what are we talking about? We're talking about gas station owners that are trying to make money from beer and cigarettes, selling lottery tickets and hot dogs and junk food and things that are a little bit more expensive to get them at a convenience store because that's the profit that a gas station makes, not from selling gas. If they get a couple cents, 10 cents, 15 cents on the gallon, that might be the most they could hope for. So it has nothing to do with gas station owners. It's got another excuse lined up for what's happening. Meanwhile, energy production affects food production. We're seeing in Europe right now all of the countries banning all the fertilizers, and even the United Nations food chief warns of chaos, hell, and widespread food shortages next year The world is facing a perfect storm on top of a perfect storm. And he goes and he talks about it. He's talking about the pandemic, and of course that caused problems, and climate problems, and the Russia-Ukraine war, inflation crippling, all the production, supply chain shortages. And then he starts talking about fertilizer. And he misses the part where a lot of countries are turning off using fertilizers. And at the same time, the biggest producers of fertilizers are saying, you can't have our fertilizer. That would be countries like China and Russia. Russia is the second largest producer of fertilizers, apparently. So we continue with all this where we're not self-sufficient. We don't have our own fertilizers. Not using fertilizers, banning fertilizers, reduces the food that a farmer is able to produce. When you reduce the food that a farmer is able to produce, you put him into a situation where he doesn't make much money. He might go under, not farm at all. And we need more farmers, not less. And at the same time, you got people like Bill Gates saying, hey, look at my GMO corn over here. All of these things move us towards less food production, more people starving. Higher energy costs means transporting that food all around the world costs more money. The costs are passed on to all the people that buy it. And now food costs go up. Food becomes more scarce. Therefore, the cost of food goes up from supply and demand. And what we're entering into is a crisis. A crisis the likes of which we've never seen. Trying to come off of a pandemic. Still with supply chain issues. And let's make energy and fertilizer as scarce as possible. We're in for a world of hurt here, and if anyone thinks that Joe Biden knows what he's doing, they're crazy. All the things that we do lately are all geared towards green energy and electric vehicles for everyone. The very expensive electric vehicles for everyone. And what we're doing is we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not looking out into the future. And by this time next year, how much of the world's going to be rioting and starving, not able to afford gas, not able to afford to heat their house this winter. Winter's coming fast. I don't know what you think about food prices right now, but it's just the beginning.